So let's get into a deep dive for what we think are some of the key extracurriculars that we would like to highlight. A note before I start, when I say best extracurriculars, this is just the three that we have picked that make the most sense when you look at it from the perspective of cognitive development, from logic. How do we develop logic at an early stage? There's so many different extracurriculars, and we wouldn't have the time to go over all of them. If you want a short answer, the best extracurricular is the one your child is interested in. But we're going to highlight three of them, beginning from speech and debate. We'll start with significance, the Bay Area landscape, and resources. Before I start with this point, what do you guys think is the greatest fear of elementary students? You guys can enter the poll, although the answer is pretty obvious because we are on the topic of speech and debate, so it's not much of a poll, but it is, of course, public speaking, right? And this is not just in terms of kids. Some adults also face that pressure later in their life. It is the most common fear along with heights. So close to 25% of the students that are polled say that they're fearful of speaking in front of their friends, being made fun of. So if this is the biggest fear, this makes complete sense that this is something that kids should venture into so they get over that, right? It is the best EC for all-around development. We start from step one by getting over that fear. Then it builds your communication skills. And once you are good in that department, say you have developed this sufficiently, then you can have that sense of confidence and take up a leadership position. Debates, speech clubs often work in teams. So if you get good at this aspect, it's quite common to see some leadership skills in an early stage. And finally, we get into the logic part, because it's not just enough to hash out clear communication that sounds nice and crispy and makes it sound like you know what you're talking about. At the end of the day, you're going to be facing people who are out to dissect your arguments. So speech and club, for number one reason why it's important, besides the ones I've stated, is it is important for cognitive development, right? It is teaching you how to structure your thoughts and come up with a nice thesis, which is important throughout our daily lives, right? It's about problem solving. So let's look at some of the schools that were ranked for speech and debate. This is the NSDA, which is the National Speech and Debate Association. It is the main authority in the US to rank schools based in this criteria. So a little bit of context: a perfect score is 900 points, and a low score is 100 points. So the NSDA every year ranks the schools in the US, all over the US, based on this particular ranking system. And when you look at those rankings, you'll see that California specifically has the largest representation in the top 100, right? If you look at the NSDA, California represents 12% of all the top schools in the US, not just the top schools, all the schools that have been ranked. In the top 25, we have 6 schools. In the mid 50s, we have 5. And in the lower tier, we have 1 school. All over the US, this is just in the top 100 schools. So even if it's lower, that is still amazing, because if you're 99 out of the whole nation, that is splendid, right? So the point being is that most schools are above the US average. However, if you look deep into this data and you dissect it, you will see some troubling factors, right? Some things that are a cause of concern. And that is the representation is skewed towards the top 20 schools indeed, but also when you look deep into the data for all of the schools, not just the top 100, some things are a little bit concerning. So there are no schools at the 900 point level. When I said top 25 over here, these schools in the top 25 were from the 700 and 800 level. So California has no schools in the 900, which is dominated by East Coast schools, specifically the ones in New York. And the second problem is that the representation of all of the schools, not just top 100, all over the US, the ones in California lie and represent the bottom tier, relatively the lower to the mid tier. If you can look at the number of schools that were polled, so there are 3 schools that are in the 600 to 900 points, again, 0 being in the 900, 3 schools, apologies. There are 6 schools in the mid tier, 400 to 500, and there are 58 schools in the lower tier. So although it says it's just 12% and 10%, that is the representation because more schools are there at the bottom tier and the lower tier compared to the higher tiers. But the staggering large, like this 58 number is significantly higher than most of the others, which is why there are some rooms of improvement in this domain, specifically speech and debate in these schools. Now that we're out of California, just one last point for California specifically, there are many external clubs that can cultivate that proficiency. Just a little side note, we're not linked with any of these institutions. This is just based on research, so we can recommend what is a good external source for you guys to use if you are located in the Bay Area. The best one is the Golden State Academy. We do know some parents from there, and the kids have won medals and awards. The reviews are good as well, and Little Loudspeakers Academy. The rest are Bay Area Debate, Envision After School, and Achiever Institute. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say this is the best or that is the best. The only one I know from personal experience is Golden State Academy. Do your own research if you do think external resources is the one you want to go, because although the reviews, I can give you an average, it's based on your location. So you have to look at the ones that are next to you and see which one works best if you want an external source. But if you want to improve on your own, there are many ways you can do that as well, right? You don't have to rely on some external source, even though most of the schools in California will be in the lower to mid tier for debate. There are many ways you can improve your efficiency. First one being offensive debating tactics, defensive debating tactics, and classical debating skills and techniques. So I'm going to go through this slightly quickly because this is more advice for kids, but you can, of course, note down all this information. And if you're interested, we do have a series of upcoming webinars, and we can venture into this topic specifically. So offensive debating tactics. When you're in debate and speech clubs, you have a for and against topic. When you're on the offensive, you're attacking your opponent's argument, right? The most important thing for this is prepare, prepare, prepare. The luxury you have being on the offensive side is that you have time to come up with a nuanced argument. So that is on your side. So your research phase needs to be very important. And you need to stay on topic. Often what happens on the defensive side of things is that, well, they don't have that much time to really anticipate what is going to be the flow of your arguments. Yes, they can put in, they can brainstorm and see these are the different avenues they can go in, but they don't know for sure. So time is not on your side if you're on the defense. So sometimes students on the defensive side try to maneuver out of arguments. So if you're on the offensive side, you need to stay on topic. In general, kids need to learn how to speak slowly, coherently, and charismatically. Now, the last part comes with practice, but slowly is something I can emphasize for parents. They think communication skills is when you can read fast. That is not important, at least in the start. It's to explain your points slowly and coherently. As long as you have gotten your point across, the pace does not matter, right? That is more of your preference per se, right? Of course, you don't have to be too slow or too fast. Those are the extremes, but the pace does not matter. I repeat, speech and body confidence. The more we gain confidence in this level, that goes up naturally. And you need to read the audience and judge. This is something the kids need to get into a habit of. Often in debate clubs, this is something that I would say a lot of them are not teaching, especially the lower to mid-tier clubs, is that, well, debate is also a form of entertainment. The audience is there to hear your arguments, but it needs to be done in a way in which it does not sound monotonous. So you need to have the ability to look at a crowd and see, okay, are we honing on the same points? Okay, we should move on. Oh, this intrigued the audience, I should continue. So it needs to be more of a jazz per se, where you have to change based on the mood of the judges and the audience. Not completely, of course, you need a structure, but it is flexible. If you're on the defensive side, the most important part is actually not talking, but listening. You have to listen and take notes because you don't know for sure what your opponent is going to come with, right? If you're the strongest partner, this is where your leadership skills come in. If you're a natural leader and you're at the level of debate where you think the student is already good, you need to instill in them a habit of working in a team. Because if you're a leader and if you are the best debater per se, and you know you are, your strength is not going to be showcased by, oh, let me say the best point. If you are truly the best debater, you need to allocate points to the rest of your team, which is where leadership and teamwork comes in, and make sure they all have points because it's a team effort at the end of the day, right? And lastly, classical debating skills and techniques. This is what's helpful for parents so you can help your children excel in debate, is get into the habit of using illustrations and examples. As I said earlier, there's an audience, there are judges. The only way you're going to make your argument compelling is by using some anecdotes and illustrations that can keep the conversation going in a non-monotonous way. You need to have a strong structure and conclusion. A good habit is actually just by writing essays, right? Your thesis needs to be structured. You have your main points. Each main point has a subpoint, right? Your conclusion ties it up, everything together. You guys already know this. There's no need to go into all of this, but it's a good way to structure your thoughts. Do not get carried away and take cheap shots. You know your kids best. If you think they do have a tendency to maybe make some snarky comments, or this is not, I wouldn't say it's bad per se. This happens in kids who are quick-witted. If they can think really quickly, they do tend to make some comments. That won't work in a debate, because the judges will actually, at the end of the day, it's also how about your charisma, right? If you see an opening to expose someone, then don't do it. Just continue with your points and move on. Learn how to work as a team. Teamwork is very important. So if you're practicing for debate, you need to do it as a team. A good manual for this is the Debater's Guide 4th edition. Again, we're not associated with anything we're recommending today, so this is just based on what we think is the best. This is a great manual. I personally was on many debate clubs as well, so excuse me. I do know that this is very helpful. And the last point that I cannot emphasize enough is use the right influences. If your kids are into debate, and it is natural that they're going to look at some other debaters of our world who are not so skilled, right? Political debates is very different from a scholarly debate. Political debates, you win by doing two things: is making your opposition look bad and making sure you're just not as bad as them, which is why the United States is in this position. Anyways, you need to pick the right influences, right? The right role models, so you can learn your debating tactics after them. It's very helpful to find someone who you can model and learn how to debate after, and pick the right influences. You as parents are going to be pivotal in doing that. Before I get into the next topic, why debate is very important is, at the end of the day, and this is what is going to be the main theme of our presentation, is that it is excellent for early stage cognitive development. This is where you can really, really learn to think, right? How do I think? How do I get my point across so that it's clear and coherent? And because you have an opposition, there will be flaws in your argument. So you will have to come up with solutions on the fly. This is problem solving. So it naturally leans into the next EC we'll be talking about.